Hey everybody, how's it going? You know, it's really hard to live in this world sometimes. There's so much misinformation and disinformation about our bodies and minds, and science is continuously learning new things about us, which can immensely benefit us, but can also confuse us to no end. If you buy your food based on, what you hear from any of the health organizations, then your head's probably spinning. I think it's best to just kind of look at traditional diets and eat whatever your body craves, kind of whatever's available to with an extent. You don't just eat sugar all day, but what I mean is there are so many unique body types, so many unique chemistries that foods are going to affect us differently. Entire populations are lactose intolerant and others aren't. I drank milk for years. Now I'm quitting. I only drink it rarely, but it's disgusting, and I know that. So some of the things that we eat and drink are things that we were raised to believe. Milk does a body good. When I was a kid, that was the commercial. And we believed it, just like we believe so much of the other bullshit. Whether bacon will save your life or cause cancer, whether alcohol will kill you or a glass of wine will save your life, everything comes down to moderation. But when it comes to foods and how they affect us, one of the most complicated issues is the microbiome. And until up to 5 years ago or so, nobody was even talking about it. It's been well known for, probably 50 plus years. It's been talked about in certain circles for 25 years or so. But only in the last 5 to 10 years have people really taken it seriously as a contributing factor to our mental health and physical health in turn. Because the body mind connection cannot be understated. So, this microbiome that lives in our gut, this flora of the gut, there can be anywhere between a couple dozen up to several hundred or more different bacteria, microorganisms that help us digest certain foods, to break down certain proteins into their respective, and basically everything is broken down. You don't actually absorb proteins, you break them down to their amino acids. Then the amino acids are rebuilt in your body as to what you need. You're digesting building blocks. Without the right bacteria, you can't properly digest. And this is often partially to blame for people with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. One of my best friends when I was younger had ulcerative colitis, and it made him miserable. It fucked with his mood heavily, and it caused many problems for him. And it when your gut is not properly digesting your food, it's a major issue. We know this. So we've been overloading people with antibiotics for years, and to me, I will do everything in my power to avoid taking an antibiotic until I'm dying from an infection, because eating antibiotics just destroys your gut bacteria, all of it, good and bad, and it can take some people months or years to properly recover from that. And we didn't really realize this in the past, but now we know better. But there are natural antibiotics that we can take, various plants and immune boosters and whatnot, but we're still kind of learning how these interact with the body too. Well, all the talk about gut bacteria has led to this startling scientific breakthrough that I guess they call it that, but for me it's not startling at all. They say that they've discovered that those same gut bacteria that we have in our intestines also exist in our brains, which many scientists, uh, they're just fascinated with this. They can't understand how these bacteria would live in our brains, and likely viruses as well, which of course we know that some viruses can lay dormant in the system and get into the brain. So how do they cross the blood-brain barrier? How do they do that? Um, why does the body let them in? Why does the brain let them remain? It's one of those questions we just don't know. But what it tells us is something pretty simple, that we're more than just a product of our ideas and thoughts. That perhaps the consciousness that we develop is in part due to many of these bacteria or viruses which help us to maybe, who knows? I mean, they could have something to do with the connectome in the brain and the way that our neurons interact. We found that without certain viruses, for example, a very particular ancient virus that is necessary for human reproduction, in fact, without it, we couldn't reproduce. And this virus, I believe, is present in the egg, or I'm not sure, I can't remember the details, but we're just starting to learn about this, and it's going to be resisted because it lends a whole new complicated aspect to the structure of the body. Now when we're laying out layers of, bone and tissue and the veins and, our nervous system, there'll have to be another dozen overlays of, the microbiome for the gut and the brain biome and these different systems that we just don't understand how they interact. And one of the most fascinating, conclusions that I've come to is that today more than ever, I believe that a zombie apocalypse is completely possible. That human nature could easily be overtaken by a virus that tells us what to think. And it led me to some very interesting philosophies over the past several years, because it was about 5 years ago when I came up with this thought that maybe we are merely vessels for bacteria. In other words, what if our evolution was directed by microorganisms? It sounds ridiculous, but while humans can be destroyed rather easily on this planet, the bacteria and the viruses that are on this planet will be able to survive much more easily. If you destroy 90% of a microorganism cluster, then if there's 10%, they'll still reproduce and continue to live. That doesn't work with a biologic, being like a human being. But our, opposable thumbs and our ability to create and our evolution into these creative, thoughtful creatures, it's pretty fascinating in itself. But it leads you to wonder, and this was just kind of a wild theory I had, whether or not we were meant to be, basically we are spaceships. We were evolved bags from our god, which our god being bacteria, if you will. I think that really puts an interesting twist on things. But it goes so far beyond that. When I learned about cordyceps and how it infects the brain of an ant, I mean, there are several different kinds of cordyceps. But cordyceps, the type that infects the ant, I believe it's Cordyceps militaris, or maybe it's sinensis, I'm not sure. But it will, if you don't know the story, these spores travel through the jungle, they land on an ant, specific kind of ant. These spores explode with the force of like a handgun. I mean, like a bullet. It's for the size of it. It makes a huge explosion when it pops, and that explosion allows the spore to get into the bloodstream of the ant. The ant continues crawling around. The spore travels through its bloodstream, enters its brain, reprograms the ant's brain to turn around, climb down from the tree, travel across the forest floor, climb up a tree to a specific height of about a meter or so, 3 to 4 feet. Then it climbs out on the edge of a branch, finds a leaf, climbs to the bottom of that leaf, grabs on as tight as it can, bites onto the leaf, and then it dies. Also, the cordyceps is protected under the leaf while it can fruit, and then it bursts out of the ant's head and body, and poof, spreads spores, and the whole cycle continues again. There is also a virus, I always get this wrong. It's found in cat feces, which you've probably heard of, toxoplasmosis, which they say pregnant women shouldn't be near cat poop and stuff like that. It's because Toxoplasma gondii, I believe it's called, will lay dormant in the brain of adults. It will go into a human's bloodstream and it will actually remain in the brain, sometimes for life. They're not sure of, but it can accumulate. From what they understand, there have been a couple studies done on people who died in motorcycle accidents doing dangerous things, and they found that there was a higher ratio of this Toxoplasma gondii in these people. Is it a parasite? I think it's a parasite, than in the normal population. Long story short, they think that it may make men more aggressive or more likely to take risks. The truth is, what it does is when it enters a rat's bloodstream, it will travel to the rat's brain and change the rat's brain to where, instead of fearing cat's urine, the smell of cat urine, it actually becomes sexually attracted to the smell of cat urine and will come out in the open seeking to be, seeking cats, basically. Then the cat will eat it, the life cycle starts all over again. So you realize this, there are viruses and parasites and bacteria out there and fungi that are controlling minds. of insects and animals. So how can we say that's not happening to us? Especially now that we've proven that several different types live in our brain right now. Perhaps that is what connects us on some level. Perhaps that is what gives us human nature. We have no idea. But for all the questions we have about consciousness and existence, I think it might be worth looking into bacteria. I guess the next phase of testing would be to see if humans can think the same way or continue preserving their personalities when these bacteria or viruses are killed off. But I don't think you can ever do that in a human brain. It's just much too difficult to determine whether you've killed them off, and if you do, you're probably going to destroy the whole organism. It's such an integral part of who we are. And a lot of people, when they hear that we have something like 9 or 10 times more foreign cells in our body than our own, or bacteria than our own cells, they're shocked to learn that, but they really shouldn't be. It could be even less, but we do have less human than foreign bodies within us, and without those foreign bodies we cannot continue to exist. So those are my thoughts on the weirdness that is bacteria in the gut and the brain, and props to all the scientists studying these things, and to the guys who sifted through thousands of samples of human fecal matter in order to figure out what's going on there, which has led to poop transplants. If you haven't heard of poop transplants, man, you're missing out. No, it's really amazing. It's actually amazing. People who have gut problems or people who are overweight, they've been able to inject other people's poop into these people's butts. Yes, it sounds disgusting, and it is. But what it does is it's like seeding their intestines with these other bacteria that otherwise probably wouldn't make it through the system. And they've had results. People have started losing weight. They've changed their diets. And some people have even had kind of a change of heart or mental thought pattern changes, which makes complete sense, because depression and anxiety are often directly linked to problems with digestion and gut bacteria. This has been shown over and over, and they've always said, well, since the gut's connected to the brain through the vagus nerve, then that must be it's telling the brain something. Well, really, it's just communicating with the other bacteria in the brain, and it's a fascinating system. So, hope you learned something, and I sure as hell have. It's fascinating stuff. It's one of my favorite areas of science. It's just genetics and manipulation of human health for the improvement of health. Of course, there's the dark side of it too, but we won't get into that. Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening. Be well.